Hey there, David Chesworth coming to you from Hilton Head Health on the beautiful Hilton Head Island, and we're here for another episode of Health Talk. Today's a special episode. I have a co-host with me, Bob Wright, our Director of Education, and we also are bringing back another guest, Ann Basta, who is a practicing psychotherapist and also a success story in her own right, a guest at Hilton Head Health, and with her own health and weight loss journey. So thanks for joining us again, Ann.
My pleasure.
And Bob, thanks for joining me today as co-host.
Glad to be here.
So today's theme is how to manage food cravings. So let's just dive right into it. And first question for you, I know you've gotten this question before from other people who are inspired by you, and I know you've experienced food cravings before. You've talked about it. How did you quit food cravings, and how would you recommend others approach quitting food cravings or managing food cravings?
Well, the short answer is I didn't. I never stopped getting cravings. You'll never stop getting cravings as a food addict. So I really had to learn that my work shouldn't be geared toward trying to never get a food craving again, but actually knowing that I'm definitely going to get them, and it doesn't correlate with my passion toward my journey or how much I love this or love my healthy lifestyle. It's just like a rogue message that's part of the addict brain, as best as I can explain it. So I had to learn that this isn't like a weak will, you're not doing something wrong because you got a craving. That, on the contrary, it probably means you're doing everything right. And your brain might be panicking and telling you like, is this really it? You sure you don't want your good old friend, the item from the bakery, whatever? So so the idea that we're ever gonna stop getting cravings isn't accurate. But what we can know is that even though we will get these cravings, you can work through them. And no feeling is final. That's kind of what I was telling to clients, that the good news is that this doesn't last forever. Not that it might feel like it lasts forever, but you'll see that, you're usually only one sleep away. That's what I tell myself.
One sleep away from what?
From getting over this craving. Like the things I crave at night, if you put that exact thing in front of me as soon as morning comes, I don't want any of it. It's just this like nighttime message that I get, maybe because we're getting tired, the day is winding down, and that's when the brain is going to be really pinging for some extra pleasure, some little dopamine hits before we call it a night, So, so you're only one sleep away from that craving going away. You just got to wait it out, ride the wave, understand that it's not a message coming as out of weak will or anything like that, and that no feeling is final.
When you're riding the wave, are there any specific strategies to sort of help you get through it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's uncomfortable, so let's make it super comfortable. Take a bath, get cozy, reach out to a friend. This is hard. Right? And so part of the work that I do with my clients is helping them kind of embrace that difficulty, feel empowered. Like when you're tackling something hard and you're doing it, that can feel really good. But if you think like, oh, I shouldn't have even got the craving to begin with. So what am I going to clap for myself that I didn't eat a donut? I shouldn't even want a donut. Like, oh no, you're going to want the donut. And the fact that you're not getting it is all the more credit to you, right? So make it comfortable. This is hard. This is hard work,
And then celebrate those victories when you have them.
For sure. For sure. Sometimes our expectation of perfection stops our celebration of progress. So that's one of my favorite quotes.
That.
Yeah.
And just to piggyback off of what you said, Bob, to celebrate it, I often hear you say write it down. Why do you say write it down?
Well, I think when people experience small victories, there's a tendency to sort of forget them. And so if you're doing this over a period of time, you might have dozens of small victories, but if you don't write them down, you kind of forget they even happened. And then it's hard to appreciate that they happened. So that's one of the things we always recommend. Write it down so that you can actually track your progress. I think there's also benefit in kind of remembering that challenge and that struggle, and to recognize you are having small victories along the way.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
So, and going back, so strategies while riding the wave. Is there anything that people can do to reduce the intensity or reduce the likelihood that the wave comes to begin with beforehand?
Oh, perfect question.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, that's where the word trigger comes in.
Okay.
Right? So since we're saying this is an addiction and that, cravings are going to come either way, what you said is the perfect word, the intensity and the duration of the craving, So knowing your triggers, once you're hungry, your decision making is not going to be the best. That's why they say don't go to the grocery store when you're hungry. So being hungry is a trigger. Seeing certain foods could be a trigger. Certain foods can be a trigger. Like I call it a complicated relationship with peanut butter, here to say. But, peanut butter essentially.
You want talking terms?
we're seeing each other, but we probably shouldn't be. But no, peanut butter, for example, I don't like to villainize any category of
Sure.
food. I'm more about like, if it's in its whole ingredient. So the less ingredients a food has, the better, right?
Can you look at me and say that part?
So my rule of thumb is the less ingredients a food has, the better. So like an apple is the best because it's just an apple, right? And so peanuts are just peanuts, the kind I get, it's organic and everything else.
You get the extra crunchy.
I do get the extra. Actually, oh no, we're starting to talk about it. Ooh, okay, no. So I have to watch out for that.
Okay.
I really do because
So that's one of yours.
That's one of my. It kind of comes and goes, right? Because it can be kind of satisfying and help me not crave other maybe less healthy things, but if I'm being honest, and I just sit there with the tub and the apples, like using it as a vehicle to get it there, it's a very high calorie dense food, and I can easily lose track, right? So again, I really try to be mindful and honest about where I am and how I'm using this peanut butter and, just things like that. But yeah, like commercials can be super duper triggering. Again, I think that the centerpiece of this whole thing has to be no shame, just this open honesty, right? Because if you feel ashamed to say that, oh man, if I see a commercial for something, this might trigger me, or maybe I shouldn't have that peanut butter today, you are embracing that you have a food addiction and there are steps that you need to take. And so that can feel a little bit shameful.
I want to come back to the shame in just a moment,
Sure.
but you said something else that I think I want to dive into a little deeper about the peanut butter being a craving, but that sometimes it comes and goes, but you'll sometimes have it because it'll help reduce other cravings.
Correct.
So is there in your opinion, is there like a spectrum of a food addiction, a spectrum of food cravings that like some things you should never have, and some things that you should have strategically, even though you might be considered part of the food addiction? Like, what's your take on that? How would you talk about that?
Okay, so I can't take credit for this answer, right?
Okay.
So I do follow a lot of other people that have gone through a similar journey, that were over 350 pounds, have lost weight through lifestyle transformation, everything else. And so one of the tips that I always thought was just, it keeps you honest, right? So put everything on a plate. That scenario I described where I'm holding the jar and scooping it out? Yeah, there's no measurements to that, right? So essentially, if you're able to track it, you are way less likely to overeat it and consume it mindlessly, right? So her quick thing is put it on a plate, okay? So if you're able to control that portion, and you're going into it knowing that this isn't about to be a peanut butter frenzy. We're gonna portion this and have the serving size, okay? That really kind of sets it up to be a mindful eating experience.
One of the phrases that sounds like that kind of goes along with is something called permission with parameters. So it's giving yourself permission to have it, enjoy it, in fact, savor it, not feel bad about it, but build boundaries around it. So having it, but only on a plate, having it only situationally. Does that sound?
That is, I literally love that wording, permission with parameters. And guess what? For some people, that can work beautifully. For me, I tried, but it's not because I don't want it to be that way. But once a certain taste hits my mouth, the whole the parameters are out the window.
Right.
Like
Right.
there are no parameters. You know, it's this thought that's like, I need to eat as much of this as I possibly can.
Even with the parameters.
So that's why you just got to be honest
Yeah.
with yourself. You got to be
Right.
honest. There's going to be relapse. It's so interesting, and I'm so glad I was able to talk with you guys during different stages of this journey. But at one stage, I had been really good with cravings, and my mind was just set. And I wasn't having a lot of these struggles at that time. And I remember you guys asking me about it, and I was like, you just got to get it done, like you just got to want it, right? But no,
Little did you know
yeah, right?
they were going to come back.
That's the thing. They never went away. They were just less intense and lasting for such a quick amount of time. And I had a routine, and I would just, my nighttime was more organized, you can say. So I'd make it to sleep sooner and wake up good.
Well, I think what I heard both of you say in different ways is that there are some foods that you can eat more mindfully and
Yes.
portion out or have permission with parameters. But then there are some foods that if you have it, all parameters out the window. Like I know Bob talks about for himself, cashews are his out the window food.
Right.
Yeah.
On people, some
Yeah.
people. There's some people that, like Bob may be able to have a whole thing of cashews in front of him and tell himself, like, we're only going to have, 6 a day. There's like no way that's going to, by the end of that day, that thing's
I'm not
going to be
that
out of there. Okay, well,
I'm not that person.
then there we go.
Yeah.
So whatever works for you is the best. But my message is that if it's not working with this intuitive eating, this, these catchphrases, it's not sinking in and you're not able to do it, there's a reason, and it's totally okay. And we just need different tools to stick to the healthy lifestyle and goals that we've set for ourselves.
So then let's loop that back to what you said before about, I think that's a good transition point, shame. So how can someone just not be ashamed? Like if they're feeling that?
Groups. There's a lot of support groups, right? Talking about it with people that get it can feel super validating. Very validating. So go ahead and get yourself to feel validated, because this is a problem that the whole world is having, that the whole country is having, So when you feel like you're not the only one, it really helps to dissipate that shame.
Is there a particular group? How do you find those groups in a local community?
It's like wherever you're at technology wise, savvy, if you prefer a more virtual community, sometimes that's just more accessible. So Facebook seems to be a place where you can basically find a group for anything, right? And things are different. So not everybody has food addiction, binge, restrict stuff. Some people just are more in a maintenance phase and they don't, that conversation might not be so relevant. So for sure, look for the group that seems relevant to what you're going through.
Okay.
So you, in your personal and professional world, you talk a lot about cravings and food addiction. Are they the same thing? And how would you define a food craving and how would you define a food addiction?
Well, I would say that a craving is part of the addiction process, right? The disease of addiction. So if there is a person who's addicted to any substance, food included, they're going to have a craving for it. A gambler, a drug addict, alcohol, anything that pretty much had elicited a major dopamine surge, right? Your brain is going to start asking for that pleasure, right? And think of when that would possibly happen, right? When we're tired, when we're already stressed, when we're sad, when we're uncomfortable. So that is usually when addictions kind of show up the most.
So you might hear people kind of like loosely saying, man, I'm craving this right now. But that person might not have an addiction.
No.
So if someone who has a craving, that doesn't necessarily mean that they definitely have an addiction. But if you have an addiction, you're going to have cravings. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The way to determine how innocent a craving is how impactful it is. Like I said, if you can be like, oh man, I should get a pizza. And then off you go doing your thing, that's wonderful for you. But for me, at nighttime, I'll be like, hey, remember when you said the word pizza? Where's that pizza? So that's what happens for me, right? But not for everybody. So again, people use those terms loosely and say, oh, I'm really craving that thing. But if you're finding that that's like taking over your life, it is what is dictating your food habits. So basically, I used to eat exclusively based on craving. I didn't even care about a hunger cue. I never even register it, because I was just eating simply to get the food that I liked,
Yeah.
So that's how you'll know the difference.
Gotcha. So if it starts to negatively impact your life and you feel like you've lost control.
Perfect. Exactly.
Bob asked a really cool question
Yeah.
before we started filming. The
Okay.
difference between compulsion and addiction.
Okay.
And given that that's your area of expertise,
Yes. Yes.
I'd love to throw that your way.
Yeah, sure. Well, just to clarify, I do specialize in eating disorders, among which would be food addiction, of course, but on a separate that is sometimes related, but often not related, I also specialize in OCD, which goes with exposure ritual prevention. So they're very different in the way that they show up psychologically. OCD basically is obsessive compulsive disorder, and it's characterized by having an obsessive thought, right? And so I said some things like when I was talking about cravings, like, ooh, I really want that pizza. I really want that pizza. It's not like that kind of a message. It's more of a generalized message about safety or fear, right? It's usually quite fear-based. So it could be like, well, what if this makes me sick or fat? So I need to check all the labels and write them down and ask other people, do you think this is a safe food? Do you think this is a bad food? So the way that it's showing up is that you get an obsessive thought, and the compulsion part is the action that you need to take to kind of address that obsessive thought, right? So checking, making lists, asking multiple people, it's almost like you're caught in a loop, right? And it's quite exhausting. It's quite exhausting. So the hallmark of OCD is more like uncertainty. You want certainty. You want to be sure, so just so we can be sure, let me do a bunch of these things.
There might be like a superstitious ritual built into it.
It's very closely tied to that sort of thinking pattern. We actually call it magical thinking, because you have the idea that your thoughts can actually control possibly what's going on, but not in a not that you're detached from reality. It's like, why not just check,
Yeah, to play it safe.
If I could put this here and I feel like maybe less people would probably die or something, let's put it here. It's not bothering you,
Yeah.
But what you just did is that you've kind of like fed into the thought that, where this bottle is does have to do with the safety of others. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's like a whole thing. A lot of people with OCD feel a lot of shame because their thoughts can be a little bit bizarre. Or, like I just said, like, how could I explain to you that this bottle really needs to be here in order for things to be okay?
Gotcha.
Right? So that's kind of the difference completely. Like, craving is a thought, addiction is
More
very
chemically based.
Yeah, that's tied in dopamine release and pleasure seeking if you boil it all the way down. But no, OCD is a very complicated anxiety disorder that makes you feel that there may be potential threats everywhere, and you can do these rituals to try and prevent them.
You talked about fatigue, you talked
yes.
about exposure, and there are strategies that you can apply to sort of ride that wave. But of course, sometimes we don't ride the wave. Sometimes we actually have whatever it is that we were craving. And so you talked earlier about shame, and it seems to me that might be a time where shame could be a real issue as well. So how do you help people manage the fact that they will slip? And when they do slip, they don't feel that shame?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's a tough thing to tackle because, you can't tell someone to not feel ashamed, but you can, of course, reassure them that this is part of the addiction cycle. And relapse is actually one of the most critical parts because it's where we learn.
Since I have a fitness background, the way that I like to think about it is like you get a marathon or some intense fitness event. It's not healthy to run a marathon every day. Most competitive fitness things are not healthy to do regularly.
Sure.
But you need to do healthy things to prepare for them so that when they do happen, you can be more resilient to them. And so these high risk situations, it's almost like running a marathon. You know, if you've not been training for it, you're going to crumble and you're going to get injured. And it seems like small self-talk practices and thinking about how would I talk to my friend are great ways to make yourself more resilient. So when that unhealthy or stressful moment does come up, you're more resilient to it.
Definitely. Absolutely. A lot of my clients that get stuck in these cycles too are perfectionists, actually, which they would disagree completely because they feel like, oh, I'm like the opposite of that, right? But actually they are classic perfectionists with all or nothing thinking, and they feel like if I've messed up once, I've ruined it forever. So the idea of just walking the middle path, being kind to yourself, forgiving yourself, having like as much consistent positive self-talk as you can, but also figuring out why that might be a struggle. If you find that you do kind of talk to yourself pretty negatively, it might be really a good idea to figure out why.
Sounds like that's when that that group would be helpful too, to have people in your corner that can sort of help talk you through it. And
Sure, definitely support groups help to kind of open up the door and just validate that other people are going through that experience. But I would say that for these particular topics that might be reflecting something a bit deeper, one-on-one therapy would probably be what's best for that.
so how important is food, nutrition in general, as it relates to mood, and maybe mood disorders?
Sure. Okay. That's a big question.
Change gears a bit.
No, I love it. Okay, yes. So, definitely a lot of things contribute to your mood, right? And how you feel physically is a major contributor to that. So that's why like pain management can be a sticky field, because pain is a huge contributor, which is obviously right, to negative moods and down moods, depression, anxiety, things of that nature, right? So at this time, I would say that there's a lot of studies. Some have made this direct correlation, but it's almost like we're getting it in piecemeal that, okay, certain foods cause inflammation. Inflammation causes GI stuff, stomach stuff, right? I'm bloated. I'm not, going to the bathroom regularly. I'm not sleeping well because I have indigestion, right? And it wouldn't even occur that, I'm upset because I'm physically uncomfortable, and maybe that has something to do with the way I'm eating, right? We just focus on, oh, my stomach hurts. So we take the Pepto and the antacid and go to the doctor and what's wrong with my stomach and all this sort of thing. But we don't maybe trace it back further to say, hey, how are you eating? When are you eating? Is it all packaged foods? Is there anything fresh going on in there? So to me, that is a very clear correlation to how you eat and how you feel, mood included.
Right. Well, I guess to go on both extremes, if you had something really indulgent, how might you feel for the next couple hours after?
Correct.
Probably not very good.
Exactly.
But if you have something very nourishing and refreshing, you'll probably notice right away you feel good.
Precisely.
So at this point, it's more about how nutrition influences overall quality of life than some specific food or nutrient that might elevate your mood.
Yeah, I think overall eating a diet that is full of nutrient-dense foods and not eating foods that are packaged, again, back to that whole ingredient thing, there are no shortage of studies on the ingredients in the foods that we eat today. All the things that are marketed toward children, cereals, snack foods. There is a laundry list of ingredients that America allows, but other countries like the UK, for example, doesn't even allow into their food. So right there, that kind of alerts me, So I've been really more mindful about the source of my food, like how it was grown, where did it come from? And then that is kind of why tracking started to have a much better connotation to me, that it wasn't about this like, oh, let's see how many calories you ate.
Right.
It's more about like, oh, look what you put in your body today. Oh, that's very good. Excellent. Something like that.
So we're very, specific solution oriented. We want to find the food or the supplement, or so if I'm not feeling well today, eat blueberries because they'll elevate your mood, or take this particular supplement. And what I'm hearing is it's more about good general health and how that influences your well-being, which how influences your mood.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anything you do one time is going to have a short-term impact. So if I eat blueberries every single day for 6 months instead of snacking on other things, then yes, that might very well have an impact on what is happening in my body. And so I can give you the very quick answer. If anyone tells you you're going to fix something quickly, you're not. It will not work. That is not how anything happens. Like even a baby, if someone was like, hey, listen, 9 months, forget it. I'll get you a baby popped out in 3. Like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Okay. Because there's a reason why it takes, whatever amount of time. So any time that you think things need to be done quickly, you need to kind of pause and accept that nothing happens that way. But on both ends.
Right.
Like the enjoyment you get out of these lifestyle changes is not a short-lived thing. It's also something you get to savor every single day. So it's fair. It's kind of a fair exchange, I would say.
Well, and I think there might be, maybe some people who are inclined to really push back and approach it that way have seen success in that strategy with short-term projects in their work life, their business, their career. They've seen success with adopting this all or nothing mindset to hit the deadline, to get it done. But the reality is, to your point, after the deadline's passed, they're not still working on that same project again and again and again.
Sure.
They're on to the next thing.
I think it's important to realize that what we're working on is our life, and that's hopefully going to be long and healthy,
Yeah.
right? So I wouldn't ever consider my life or my health a short-term project. So if you kind of view it that way and view like every decision you make is either something that's going to contribute to your health and longevity, or it's not.
Well, it kind of goes back to what you said earlier. You're implying there's no deadline, and that kind of ties into what you said, that no feeling is final.
No feeling is final. We're on a journey.
Yeah. And
We're on a journey, yeah.
For that matter, that's even for the good feelings too.
Yeah.
So expecting, like you said, that the other ones are going to come up, and they're going to go back and forth and back and forth.
That's right.
Is there any danger in getting too comfortable in a positive feeling?
Comfortable in a positive feeling. I would say that the most positive feelings come with an active, desire and work toward it. So I have to say that the most positive feelings that I've ever experienced came because I was doing something, not because I was just sitting around soaking up the positivity, which is kind of what I'm doing, but it's kind of very much related to like my lifestyle. Literally like that, my lifestyle. So in order to feel good, there are things I need to do to feel good. I need to take my walk. I need to watch what I'm eating. I need to drink water. You know what I mean? So I want to be comfortable in that feeling, which would encourage me to keep doing those activities. So that's, like
Absolutely.
that positive feeling mostly didn't just come from nothing,
Right.
Yeah.
I know it's a very kind of subjective topic. I know you talk about this in your Staying on Track class, how there's not like one magic bullet, and it's not necessarily about what happens, but how you feel about what happens and what you do about what happens. And actually, do you mind sharing that cruise ship story? I think that about staying connected.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we had a guest that came to our program years ago, and she said, there's a class that I do called Staying on Track, and in that class she said, I'm leaving the program on Sunday, and then immediately going on a 2-week cruise on Wednesday. And everybody in the class went, well, why would you do that? Why would you leave this structured environment and go onto what is arguably the most challenging situation you can actually go on? And she said, well, the reason I did it is that I've never really managed cruises very well. Every time I go on a cruise, I gain a lot of weight, I get off track. And I came here specifically because I wanted to develop a plan that would help me manage the cruise more effectively. And so she, the two things that she liked that phrase we use here, unwise, better, best.
Oh, yeah. Love it.
And then she also was far more active than she had ever been on a cruise before. So she came home from the cruise, importantly had a good time. It would be a lousy vacation if she didn't have a good time.
Sure.
Stepped on the scale the next day and had gained 2 pounds. But she called me and she said, but I feel like I lost 8. And she used the word, and this is why I tell the story, she used the phrase, I went into damage control mode. She recognized that there are some situations where the deck is really stacked. And if you can get through that situation, having minimized the damage, that's a real success. Where in the past, it would have been, I gained 2 pounds, I blew it. So that was a real important sort of rephrasing of her experience.
And just to add to that, the reason that she felt like she lost 8 is because I think you normally mentioned that her average weight gain is 10 pounds.
Yeah, in the past, she would gain a lot of weight when she go on these cruises.
But this time it was 2 pounds,
Right.
so she felt like she lost.
No, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. It seems like she really was able to incorporate all those things we were discussing earlier, which is recognizing that a cruise ship presents a problem, it's a tempting environment, and that you need to go into it with a plan. So
Exactly.
that's just beautiful. And she didn't feel ashamed to say that she needs help. You know, it's not a breeze to go into a cruise ship, even after a program like this.
Right.
So to say that and recognize it and get the help, ask for the help, use it, that's it. That's how you win. That's how
Yeah,
you succeed. That's
exactly.
so beautiful.
Similarly, had another former guest call back. He had a birthday. He just had his birthday come up. He said, "David, I know how much you guys love those off the scale victories. So here you go." And he said, and this story isn't going to even sound healthy if you just take the snapshot of it. But he said, on my birthday, I had half a pizza. But on every birthday in the past, I would have normally easily had 2 full pizzas. And he said, I was satisfied after half a pizza. And so I told, Bob's voice was in my head. I said, write it down, write it down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. All success is relative.
Totally.
So comparison is the thief of joy. Okay? So do not compare yourself to anybody's journey because everybody is completely different. The way their body works is different. You know, everything is different. We're all unique. Okay? So comparison is the thief of joy. So I love that he used himself as the reference. Just like that lady, she used herself, which is what counts.
Absolutely.
So that's fantastic. I love that.
That's a new one. I haven't heard that one before. I like it.
Comparison is the
Yes,
thief
I
of
like
joy.
that.
I mean, in the age of social media, when we see all these images and all these things that we think people are doing and we compare ourselves and feel like we're not, we're inadequate, whatever. So it's important to remember that.
So, do you have any other questions, Bob?
I think people struggle a lot with this idea of tracking. And you said something earlier that I just, if we have a couple minutes to sort of go back to,
we do.
You said that it is kind of a pain if you're just tracking like a number, tracking calories. But you said, but if I'm tracking my experience, that's a different mindset. Could you talk about that a little bit more? Because I think there's tremendous resistance to tracking, and yet I'm hearing from you that's a really important strategy.
Yes. This is one of the things I discussed in my talk, and I was, saying how the 3 tenets that have contributed the most to my success is tracking, discipline, and discomfort. And I went in further about, defining those terms a bit differently from what we're used to. But tracking, I can say that to a client and they're almost like completely shut down.
Right.
They don't want to have any part of it because what tracking used to mean is I can't have this and I can't have this and I can't have that and I can't have that and I can't have that. Okay. So tracking became synonymous with all the things you cannot have. So that's going to feel like a major bummer. Okay. So I turned it around to what I can have. I can eat blueberries. I can eat strawberries. I can eat bread. I can eat bananas. I can eat yogurt. I can eat all these amazing things that I'm super proud to put into my body. So once you shift that mindset from what I can have instead of what I can't get to do, things really take a whole different perspective. And then it feels empowering. It feels empowering to know what you're putting in your body. It's very important to know that, right? So that's kind of what worked for me, to change it from tracking means all the things I can't have and feeling very restricted to like, oh my gosh, no, this is all the things that I can do and can have.
Great.
Yeah.
What did that transition look like for you? Because, so it's very I think it's very difficult to come out of a can't mindset and even if you're told logically how to do it.
Sure, sure.
The knee-jerk reaction is to default to can't. How did you transition into can is my new default, or it's more common than it used to be?
I think I just started to accept that things are going to happen differently from what I thought, which is a big deal for me because I'm not a know-it-all, but like, you know, I know a couple of things here and there, but yeah, I just felt like I know all about weight loss and I know all about these things and, you know, that's not going to work for me and that's not going to work for me. Like I said before, if there's a quick fix, no, it's not going to work. And if you feel like you're going to do this without any mindful eating or awareness of your movement and what you're putting in your body, most likely not going to work, not going to be sustainable, right? So because I really embraced this as like a lifestyle transformation and really started to look at this body as the only thing I have to carry me through life. I don't get another one, you know, I can't replace it with something else. And I started to really think about everything going into it and all the things I do to it is directly affecting the function of this entity, this body of mine. So again, it was just being able to say that I hate tracking and I've always hated it. And like, you know, that's not the thing that I like to do. And being able to say that and then being like, okay, well, why? And it was like, well, because it makes me feel like I can't have anything. And it's like, well, what if it makes you feel like you can have everything?
Aha.
Okay,
Right.
let's bring that finish line closer. This is hard. This is hard. Make it as easy as possible.
But it
This
sounds
is
like
hard,
you were
yes.
even asking yourself the right questions
That's right.
to rewire the way you saw things.
Yes, it was critical. It was a very critical thing for me personally because all these healthy habits really felt like a punishment before. Really did. What? I can't eat whatever I want? What? I gotta get up and walk? Like, what is this nightmare?
Yeah.
You know, I had this revelation that, you know, before 2016, if you told me you're gonna live the life I'm living here now today, I would have been like, that is actually impossible. And I'd probably more likely grow wings and fly away or something, right? And if you told me today, you gotta go back and live like that again, smoke a pack of cigarettes, consume almost 10,000 calories a night, and stay up with insomnia, binge, restrict cycle, I don't think I could make it like a day or two. I couldn't even imagine
Going back.
doing anything like that. So, I mean, it gives me chills sometimes to believe that that was that person and I'm that
Yeah.
same person, but totally different, you know?
Well, and the reason I asked you that, the question about can versus can't, is because I remember that version of you before you came.
Oh,
here,
yeah.
and you didn't have any lack of knowledge.
No,
You didn't
no.
have any lack of, it's not like you've never heard someone say focus
No.
on what you can do versus what you can't do
Oh, yeah.
before. In fact, you may have made some snarky comment like, oh great, I can have a salad.
Oh, David,
Thank
now
you very much.
we're crossing the line here.
So I guess I really appreciate you answering that about like you really introspectively asked some questions. Like, are there any questions that you like for our listeners that you would recommend that they ask themselves and really reflect on to help transition their mindset?
Sure. Why is it so hard? Ask yourself. Sometimes because we feel like it shouldn't be hard and it shouldn't be like this and I should this and I should that and we should all over ourselves, you know? So that can block us from asking these questions. Why is this so hard? Why do I want these foods after they've caused indigestion and made me feel terrible and hurt my stomach? Why do I keep doing this? How can I make it easier? Because again, if we're stuck in all or nothing, it's either I eat whatever I want and I'll start tomorrow, or, you know, I have to suffer. I have to suffer through. Suffering is not sustainable. Discomfort is. Discomfort is sustainable. And it can actually eventually produce a growth mindset. Like something's coming out of this discomfort. It's not for nothing. But suffering feels like it's for nothing and it's miserable and it's a punishment and you want it to end. So don't make it feel like suffering. Don't be starving. Go eat a blueberry. Go eat them. Go eat apples. I didn't want apples, David. I wanted something else.
So
You know?
that really resonates with me in fitness because with flexibility, with a lot of exercise, we encourage discomfort but not pain.
Yes.
Or I guess suffering.
Yeah, that's right.
And with stretching, for example, we say you should look for tension and tightness, discomfort. You should still be able to breathe. But if you go too far and you're finding yourself holding your breath, it's sharp, stabbing, electric, and you're thinking to yourself, I'd rather be anywhere else but here.
Yes.
Anywhere else but here.
Yes.
And you should probably come out of it. Like, how do you know you've crossed over into suffering?
Where it feels not sustainable, where you feel like this is the end for me. Like you said, I'd rather be anywhere else. I just want this experience to end. But if it feels like you can breathe, you're okay. I have this kind of dialogue in my mind with yoga, with the treadmill, me and the old treadmill, But that thing taught me a lot about the difference between suffering and discomfort. Okay, stop. Why? Why do you need to stop? Are you tired? I'm having this talk in my head, which makes the time go by the way. But I really talk to myself and ask myself, is it your mind telling you have to stop before something happens? What is that something? What are you afraid of? You'll be out of breath? So what? You'll get sweaty? So what?
So a couple questions. You said, why is this so hard?
Why is this so hard?
And what are things that I can do that are uncomfortable but not painful or suffering?
Correct.
Are there any other questions that you would challenge listeners to ask themselves?
What has worked before? What hasn't worked? Just again, once we're able to clear the road to ask these questions, we're in a very good place. If you are able to ask yourself these questions, please capitalize on this momentum and talk to a professional. It really does wonders. And this isn't something that, don't think about how long do I have to see a therapist. A lot of my clients, how long am I have to see you?
Just to help you out a little bit, you even told me professionals see professionals.
Absolutely. I definitely got through this journey by having mental health the entire way. I saw my therapist, I talked to them, absolutely.
Is there a particular professional? Who should you look for?
It's going to be a psychotherapist. I'm from New Jersey, so they're LCSWs, they're called, so licensed clinical social workers. Obviously, PsyDs, PhDs in psychology. The thing about psychiatrists is they're not necessarily the best trained for talk therapy. They absolutely can provide a lot of information about medication and if that intervention would help, right? But it's, professionals like the social workers and the psychotherapists that are really trained in that talk therapy. So there's a website called Psychology Today, and you literally just get on it, put your zip code in, and search by anything you want. Obesity, eating disorders, anxiety, any topic you want. And it will bring for you all the professionals in your area that cover that.
That's a good tip.
You can find me on there, actually.
Right.
Smiling face.
Yes, just like that.
Well, and I feel like we could talk to you for hours on end.
Oh, I love it.
But we are running out of time. Do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to impart on our listeners for today?
Okay, so last time I said pick one thing.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, you did.
So this time I'm going to say make it as easy as possible. This is already hard, so let's make it less hard as much as we can. Don't shy away from support and comfort while riding the wave, okay? And know the difference between suffering and discomfort.
Right. I guess the extreme is when you're at Hilton Head Health, you're in a bubble. The healthy choice is always the easy choice.
Yes.
Can you replicate any of that back home?
Correct.
Can you replicate any of that?
Yeah. Love it.
We can't thank you enough for coming today. The reason we keep bringing you back, you were on our old podcast before we had this one. We've been on this one twice already. You are truly an inspirational story. I mean, not only from a personal level, but from a professional level, you're helping others get through this. You're a living, breathing example of how it's not easy, but it's possible. And that you mentioned earlier, once you're there, you can't imagine going back. It would be actually harder to go back.
Yes.
So I think there's so much value that our listeners get from you being here. So again, can't thank you enough for being here.
Thank you. It's
Yeah.
my
So-
absolute pleasure. I love
yeah.
it.
So if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to comment, subscribe, and also let us know what else you want to hear us talk about. If you have questions for Bob and myself, if there's any other people you want us to interview, let us know. Ultimately, remember, this podcast is for you. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we can't wait to see you at the next one.